My name is Clarice, and I am 62 years old. After 35 years as an elementary school teacher in Michigan, I thought I understood people pretty well. But nothing prepared me for the moment. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, poured wine for her mother and then immediately turned to me and asked me to wash dishes. In that instant, everything became crystal clear. I was not a mother in that house. I was the help. So while everyone continued chatting and celebrating, I quietly gathered my purse and walked out the door. Before I share what happened when they finally noticed I was gone, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And subscribe if you've ever had to walk away from people who didn't appreciate you. William was always a special child, bright, sensitive, with a smile that could light up a room. When his father David passed away from a sudden heart attack, when William was just 15, our bond grew even stronger. It was just the two of us against the world. I picked up extra tutoring jobs to save for his college fund, and we made it through those difficult years together. I still remember driving him to college, my old station wagon packed to the roof with everything he owned. It nearly broke my heart to leave him there, but I knew he needed to spread his wings. Through his undergraduate years and then law school, I supported him in every way I could. When he struggled with difficult classes, I would drive 3 hours each way on weekends to bring home-cooked meals and offer encouragement. When he couldn't afford rent during his unpaid internship, I sent what I could from my teacher's salary. After law school, William landed a position at a prestigious firm in Detroit. I was so proud watching him build his career, working long hours to establish himself. During those early years, he would call me several times a week, and we would have Sunday dinner together, at least twice a month. He valued my advice and always made time for me, despite his busy schedule. Everything changed 5 years ago when William met Melissa at a charity gala. She came from a wealthy family with connections throughout the state. Her father, Richard, owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, and her mother, Eleanor, was active in the most exclusive social circles. Melissa herself worked in public relations for a major corporation. When William first brought her to meet me, Melissa was polite and charming. She complimented my small but cozy home and asked questions about my teaching career. But I noticed something in her eyes when she looked around my modest living room, a barely perceptible tightening of her smile when I mentioned my volunteer work at the local literacy center instead of the high-profile charities her family supported. They married 3 years ago in an elaborate ceremony that seemed designed to showcase the difference between our families. The Thompsons, Melissa's family, arrived in matching designer outfits and seemed to know everyone important at the country club venue. Meanwhile, I wore the nicest dress I could afford, a blue silk number I had saved for months to purchase. During the reception, I found myself seated at a table far from William, with distant relatives and work colleagues, while the Thompsons occupied the places of honor. After the wedding, I noticed William began to change. His calls became less frequent. Our Sunday dinners reduced to monthly, then quarterly events. When I would suggest getting together, there was always some reason they couldn't make it a work event or social obligation with Melissa's family. I tried my best to build a relationship with Melissa. I brought thoughtful gifts when invited to their new home, offered to help with household projects, and always expressed interest in her work and activities. But no matter what I did, I could feel her keeping me at arm's length. At family gatherings, I began to notice a pattern. My opinions were politely acknowledged, then ignored. If I shared a story from William's childhood, Melissa would quickly change the subject. Meanwhile, Eleanor, Melissa's mother, was treated like a font of wisdom. Her suggestions about everything from home decor to vacation destinations were received with enthusiasm. Eleanor never missed an opportunity to establish her primary place in their lives. She would reference private conversations with William, emphasize their family traditions, and subtly compare our different backgrounds. In our family, we've always valued formal education, she might say, knowing full well that I had put myself through state college while working part-time. I made excuses for the behavior at first. Melissa was adjusting to married life. William was busy with his career. They were establishing their own traditions. I told myself not to take it personally when my calls went to voicemail or my invitations were declined. My life continued in its quiet way. I lived in the same small 3-bedroom house where William grew up comfortable with my teacher's pension and the small inheritance David had left us. I volunteered at the literacy center 3 days a week, teaching adults to read. I had my garden, my book club, and a small circle of close friends who had been my support system for decades. It was a stark contrast to William and Melissa's life in their new suburban development, with their luxury cars and social calendar full of networking events. Sometimes, when I visited their immaculate home, with its pristine white furniture that seemed designed for show rather than comfort, I wondered if William missed the warmth of the home where he grew up. The first time I truly felt the sting of differential treatment was at the housewarming party for William and Melissa's new home. They had purchased a large colonial in an exclusive neighborhood, with Melissa's father helping with the down payment. I hadn't been consulted or even told about the purchase until after the papers were signed, though I later learned Richard had been involved in every step of the process. When I arrived for the housewarming, Eleanor was arranging flowers in the dining room while Richard chatted with William in the study. Melissa greeted me with a quick hug before immediately handing me a stack of appetizer plates. "Could you set these out on the patio table and then maybe help in the kitchen? The caterers need direction on where to put everything." I spent most of that evening directing caterers and helping clean up, while Eleanor mingled with guests playing the role of proud mother. When I tried to join a conversation with William and some of his colleagues, Melissa quickly interrupted. "William, could your mom check on the ice situation? We seem to be running low." On the drive home, I cried for the first time since David's funeral. The message had been clear. Melissa had one role for her mother and another for me. When I tried to discuss my feelings with William a few days later, his response cut deep. "Mom, you are overreacting. Melissa is just organized and likes things a certain way. She was stressed about making a good impression. Please don't make this into something it isn't." But it wasn't an isolated incident. When they redecorated the house, William called Richard for advice on contractors. When I offered my grandmother's antique dining set that William had always loved, Melissa declined, saying it didn't fit their aesthetic. When I suggested continuing our tradition of Christmas Eve dinner at my house, Melissa insisted they needed to establish their own traditions. Thanksgiving that year was another painful experience. I spent hours making my special cranberry relish that William had loved since childhood. When I arrived and placed it on the buffet, Melissa rearranged things, moving my contribution to the back and featuring her mother's catered dishes prominently. "Your recipe is a bit too tart for most of our guests," she explained with a thin smile. "But it's sweet that you wanted to bring something." During dinner, I found myself seated at the extended family table with Melissa's cousins, whom I barely knew, while Eleanor and Richard sat with William and Melissa at the main table. Throughout the meal, I watched as William deferred to his in-laws, laughing at Richard's jokes and complimenting Eleanor's taste in wine. He barely made it over to check on me. When William's birthday came around, I was shocked to learn that Melissa had planned a friends-only celebration at an exclusive restaurant. When I called William to ask about it, he seemed uncomfortable. "It's just a small thing Melissa put together with some work colleagues and friends. Very casual. We can do a family dinner another time." I later saw photos on social media showing quite an elaborate party with Eleanor and Richard clearly in attendance. The family dinner never materialized. My friend Judith, who had known William since he was a baby, didn't mince words when I confided in her. "They're taking advantage of you, Clarice. You're bending over backward to accommodate them, and they're treating you like an afterthought. It's not right." But I couldn't bring myself to confront the situation directly. William was my only child, and I feared creating tension would only push him further away. So I continued trying to please, updating my wardrobe for visits to their home, bringing thoughtful gifts showing interest in Melissa's career and social circle. I kept hoping that, with time, I would be accepted as an equal part of their family. As months passed, the instances of being sidelined became more frequent and obvious. At a Memorial Day barbecue, Melissa assigned me to watch the children in the pool, while William and her parents enjoyed cocktails on the deck. When I finally joined them, damp from splashing children, the conversation immediately shifted from their upcoming European vacation to whether I could water their plants while they were away. During a Sunday brunch at their country club, I overheard a conversation that cut me to the quick. I was returning from the restroom when I heard Melissa's voice around the corner. "Does your mother always have to bring up her teaching stories? No one cares about what some third grader did 20 years ago." What hurt even more was William's response. A low chuckle followed by, "She does tend to go on. Just smile and nod. That's what I do." I paused in the hallway, blood rushing to my face. The son who had once hung on my every word, who had proudly introduced me to his college friends as the best teacher in Michigan, was now dismissing me to his wife. I composed myself and returned to the table, but something inside me had shifted. The following week, Melissa announced her pregnancy, and I was genuinely thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. I hoped this new chapter might bring us closer, Instead, it created yet another arena for comparison and exclusion. When I offered some gentle advice about morning sickness remedies that had helped me during my pregnancy with William, Melissa looked at me as if I'd suggested something dangerous. Those old-fashioned remedies aren't really recommended anymore, Clarice. My doctor has me on a special prenatal regimen, and Mother has already found the best doula in the state. Eleanor nodded sagely. In our family, we've always prioritized the most current medical guidance. Times have changed so much since your day, Clarice. William said nothing, scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't heard the exchange. At Melissa's baby shower, I arrived early to help set up, only to be directed to the kitchen to arrange food, while Eleanor greeted guests and opened gifts alongside Melissa. When it came time for advice cards, Melissa read Eleanor's aloud to appreciative laughter and awes from the crowd. Mine was acknowledged with a quick, "Thank you, Clarice," before moving on to her friend's contribution. The pattern continued as they prepared for the baby. When they began renovating the nursery, Melissa consulted with her mother about every detail, while relegating me to assembling furniture and organizing baby clothes. When I offered William the handmade cradle his father had built for him, he hesitated. "It's really nice, Mom, but Melissa has already ordered a custom crib from this exclusive European designer. Maybe we could put your cradle in the guest room or basement." Judith became increasingly concerned as I shared these incidents with her. "Clarice, do you realize what's happening? They're systematically pushing you to the margins of William's life. And the worst part is, he's allowing it. He's just trying to keep peace with Melissa," I defended, though my conviction was weakening. "No," Judith insisted. "He's choosing the path of least resistance at your expense. That's not keeping peace, that's throwing you under the bus." Deep down, I knew she was right. The pain wasn't just from Melissa's treatment of me, but from William's betrayal. The boy I had raised alone, sacrificed for, and championed at every turn was standing by while I was diminished and dismissed. Each slight built upon the last, creating a mountain of hurt I could no longer ignore. I began declining some invitations, protecting myself from situations where I knew I would be treated as an accessory rather than family. William barely seemed to notice my increasing absence, calling less frequently and making fewer efforts to include me in their lives. The pregnancy progressed, and with it, my sense of being an outsider grew. When they learned they were having a girl, Melissa's parents were immediately called and included in a celebratory dinner. I received a text message the following day. I began to wonder if there would be any meaningful place for me in my grandchild's life. Would I be the grandmother who was called upon to babysit when convenient, but excluded from milestone celebrations? Would my granddaughter grow up seeing me treated as less important, less valuable than her other grandmother? The thought broke my heart, but I continued to hope that the baby's arrival might somehow change the dynamic. Perhaps becoming parents would give William and Melissa a new perspective on family bonds and the importance of honoring those who came before. The event that changed everything was supposed to be a happy occasion. William had received a significant promotion at his law firm, and they decided to combine the celebration with a gender reveal party for close family and friends. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, carefully selecting a gift for William and a special keepsake for my future granddaughter. Their home was decorated beautifully when I arrived with pink balloons and flowers everywhere, following the earlier private gender reveal. I had brought a homemade strawberry cake, William's favorite since childhood, spending hours making sure it was perfect. "Oh," Melissa said when I presented it, her smile tight. "That's very sweet, but we already ordered a professional cake from that bakery downtown. Maybe we can serve yours another time." My cake was taken to the kitchen and left on a counter never to be mentioned again. Melissa's parents arrived shortly after making a grand entrance with lavish gifts and loud exclamations. Melissa rushed to embrace them, leading them on a tour of the recent nursery renovations. William followed, leaving me alone in the living room with my discarded cake gift still in hand. "Make yourself at home, Mom," he called over his shoulder. "There are some appetizer trays in the kitchen that need arranging if you want to help." I spent the next hour arranging food and setting the table while the family tour continued upstairs. When other guests began arriving, Melissa directed them to the back patio where drinks were being served. I continued working in the kitchen until everything was perfectly arranged before joining the party. Dinner was served buffet style, but Melissa personally filled plates for her parents, ensuring they got the best portions of everything. I waited in line with the other guests, trying to maintain my dignity, despite feeling increasingly invisible. The defining moment came after dinner. We were all seated in the living room, William opening congratulatory cards for his promotion. Melissa was moving around the room, ensuring everyone had what they needed. She approached her mother with a bottle of expensive red wine. "More wine, Mother?" she asked carefully, filling Eleanor's glass. "Thank you, darling," Eleanor responded warmly. "You're always so thoughtful." Melissa smiled at her mother before turning to me. Her expression shifted subtly as she said, "Clarice, would you mind washing some of these dishes? We're running out of the good plates for dessert." There it was, the stark, undeniable contrast. In one breath, Eleanor was served like an honored guest, while I was assigned to kitchen duty. No one seemed to notice the disparity. William continued opening cards. Eleanor sipped her wine. Guests chatted amicably, and I, the mother of the man being celebrated, was dismissed to the kitchen. As I stood at the sink, hands immersed in soapy water, I listened to the conversation continuing in the living room. Melissa and Eleanor were discussing nursery colors and baby names. William was deferring to Eleanor's opinions about everything from crib placement to pediatricians. "Your mother has such wonderful taste," I heard William say to Melissa. "We're lucky to have her guidance." Tears formed in my eyes, but I blinked them away. In that moment, something crystallized within me. A realization so clear and sharp, it took my breath away. I was not a mother here. I was not even a guest. I was the help. I dried my hands slowly on a kitchen towel, listening to the laughter and conversation that flowed without me. No one had checked on me. No one had noticed my absence from the gathering. I was as invisible as the plates I was washing. With a strange sense of calm, I gathered my purse from the hall closet. I took one last look at the party at my son, with his arm around his wife at Eleanor, holding court in the center of the room. Then I silently slipped out the side door to my car. As I drove away, tears streamed down my face, but there was also an unexpected feeling of relief. The pretense was over. I no longer had to smile through the hurt or make excuses for being treated as less than. For the first time in years, I had honored my own feelings instead of suppressing them for William's comfort. The drive home was a blur of tears and surprising clarity. Questions I had been avoiding for years suddenly demanded answers. Why had I allowed this treatment to continue? Why had William become so blind to my feelings? What would a healthier relationship with my son and his family look like? Once home, I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and sat in my garden watching the sunset. The silence was broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of children playing. I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and liberation. When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, there were 12 missed calls from William and a series of increasingly frantic texts. "Mom, where are you? Did you leave? Mom, answer your phone. Melissa is upset. Mom, you're being dramatic. Call me back." I noted with a sad smile that there was no apology, no recognition of what had happened, just annoyance at my disruption of their evening. I sent a brief text. "I'm fine, needed some space, will call when ready." Then I turned off my phone again and spent the day reorganizing my craft room, something I had been putting off for months. The simple act of creating order in my own space felt symbolic somehow. Judith called on my landline concerned when she couldn't reach my cell. "William called me looking for you," she said. "He sounded irritated rather than worried. I told him you were probably fine and just needed some time to yourself." "Thank you," I replied. "That's exactly what I need." "What happened?" she asked. I told her about the party, the wine, the dishes, the invisible exit. "Good for you," she said firmly. "It's about time you showed them there are consequences to treating you like a doormat." The next morning, William appeared at my door. His expression was a mix of confusion and annoyance rather than concern. "You could have said goodbye," he began without preamble. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone. How could you just leave without saying anything?" I invited him in silently, gesturing to the living room. We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us, like a neutral zone. "Did anyone notice I was gone right away?" I asked calmly. He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, no, not immediately. We were all caught up in the celebration. I was in the kitchen washing dishes for over 40 minutes, William. No one came to check on me or invite me back to the party. When Melissa poured wine for her mother and then immediately asked me to wash dishes, it became very clear where I stand in your home." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his childhood when he was trying to avoid responsibility. "Mom, you're overreacting. Melissa was just trying to keep everything running smoothly. She asks everyone to help out." "Did she ask her mother to help with dishes? Or was Eleanor served wine while I served your guests?" His silence was answer enough. "I raised you alone after your father died," I continued quietly. "I worked extra jobs to put you through college. I drove 3 hours every weekend to bring you home-cooked meals during law school. And now, I watch as you treat your mother-in-law like royalty while relegating me to kitchen duty. That's not fair, he protested weakly. No, it's not, I agreed. It's not fair at all, and I won't participate in it anymore. I won't attend family functions where I'm treated as the help rather than as your mother. William stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. This quiet, firm woman was not the accommodating mother he had come to take for granted. What are you saying? He asked cautiously. I'm saying I deserve better. And until that changes, I'll be keeping my distance. He left shortly after a strange mix of confusion and dawning awareness on his face. As his car pulled away, I received a text from Melissa. William is very upset. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. The old Clarice would have apologized, would have scrambled to smooth things over. But that version of me had walked out of their house the night before and wasn't coming back. Judith came over that evening with a bottle of wine and takeout. To boundaries, she toasted, raising her glass. It's about time you stood up for yourself. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a complicated mix of sadness about the distance with William, but pride in my newfound self-respect. In the weeks that followed, I maintained my boundary despite increasing pressure. William called several times, his messages, ranging from annoyed to conciliatory, but never containing a real recognition of the pattern that had developed. When an invitation arrived for a family dinner the following Sunday, I responded with a simple, "No, thank you." No explanation, no alternative suggestion. William called immediately. "Mom, you can't just keep saying no to everything. We're family." "Yes, we are," I agreed. "And that's why I expect to be treated with the same respect you show Melissa's parents." The conversation ended awkwardly, but I felt a shift in William's tone. He was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. Instead of dwelling on the situation, I focused on rebuilding other relationships and interests. I joined a book club at the library, reconnected with former colleagues for monthly lunches, and planned a weekend trip to Chicago with Judith and 2 other friends. I also reached out to my sister in Oregon, with whom I'd lost touch over the years. Our video calls became a weekly highlight, and we began planning for her to visit in the summer. I found myself laughing, more sleeping better, and feeling more at peace than I had in years. 3 weeks after the party incident, I received an unexpected call from Eleanor Melissa's mother. "Clarice," she began formally, "William tells me you're upset with how you've been treated at family gatherings." "Yes," I replied, simply offering no elaboration. After an uncomfortable silence, she continued, "I wanted to say that I never meant to make you feel excluded. Family is important to me." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, however small. "I appreciate that, Eleanor. Family is important to me too. That's why it hurts to be treated as less valuable than other family members." "I'm sure no one intended to make you feel that way," she said, defensive, but not dismissive. "Intentions and impact can be very different," I responded. "But I appreciate you calling." The conversation ended cordially, and while nothing was resolved, something had shifted. I was being seen perhaps for the first time. A few days later, William came to visit alone. This time he brought coffee and my favorite pastries from the bakery we used to visit together on Saturday mornings when he was in high school. It was a small gesture, but meaningful. We sat in the backyard, the spring flowers beginning to bloom around us. William seemed more reflective than during his previous visit. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began hesitantly, "about how we treat you versus how we treat Melissa's parents." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I didn't realize how things looked from your perspective, how they felt to you." He paused, struggling with his words. "I got caught up in Melissa's world, her family's way of doing things. They're very specific about their expectations. And my feelings became secondary," I finished for him. He nodded, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I should have been more aware. You deserved better from me. I'm sorry, Mom." It was the first genuine apology, and it loosened something tight in my chest. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. We talked for over an hour more honestly than we had in years. William admitted that he had been trying to impress his in-laws to fit into their social circle and expectations. In doing so, he had begun to see his own background and, by extension, me through their eyes rather than his own. "I forgot who I am, where I come from," he admitted. "Dad would be so disappointed in me." "He would want you to find your way back," I said gently. As William was leaving, he hugged me tightly the way he used to, before Melissa came into the picture. "I miss you, Mom. The real you, not the polite version that's been walking on eggshells around us for years." "I miss you too," I replied. "And I'm not going anywhere. I'm just waiting for you to see me again." Over the following months, I found my inner strength growing. I became comfortable with the new dynamic, no longer feeling desperate for William's approval or inclusion. I developed new interests and relationships, independent of my identity as William's mother. I traveled more, volunteered more, and began taking a pottery class I had always been interested in. When Melissa's due date approached, William called to ask if I would want to meet my granddaughter when she arrived. "Of course," I said, "but on equal terms with the other grandparents." "I understand," he said, and I believed that maybe, finally, he did. 6 months after that fateful dinner party, I held my granddaughter Emma for the first time. She had William's eyes and a full head of dark hair, tiny fingers gripping my thumb with surprising strength. The atmosphere in their home had changed. William was more attentive to balance, making sure I was included in conversations and decisions. Melissa was still somewhat distant, but showed basic respect, no longer assigning me tasks or speaking over me. I established clear boundaries from the beginning. I declined some invitations when they felt obligatory rather than genuine. When I did visit, it was on my terms, bringing only gifts I wanted to give, staying only as long as felt comfortable. My relationship with Emma brought unexpected joy. Despite the complicated dynamics with her parents, there was nothing but love between grandmother and granddaughter. I treasured our time together, building a bond that was entirely our own. William made consistent efforts to include me in meaningful ways. He began calling more regularly, not just about baby updates, but to ask my advice or simply chat about his day. He occasionally visited me alone, bringing Emma for special grandmother time while reconnecting with the home where he grew up. Melissa maintained a certain distance, but the dismissive behavior stopped. Whether this change came from genuine reflection or William's insistence, I couldn't be sure. What mattered was that the dynamic had shifted to one of basic respect. My relationship with Eleanor evolved as well. The competition between us gradually eased into a cautious mutual respect. We were different women, with different approaches to grandmotherhood, but we shared a love for Emma that transcended our differences. One afternoon, as I was preparing to leave after a visit, Eleanor surprised me with a comment. "You know, Emma has your smile when she's really happy. Those same crinkles around the eyes." It was a small moment of connection, an acknowledgement of my place in this family's story. Looking back on my journey from doormat to self-advocate, I recognize both the pain and necessity of establishing boundaries. For years, I had allowed myself to be diminished, hoping that accommodation would lead to acceptance. It never did. Only when I valued myself enough to walk away did others begin to see my worth. My relationship with William has actually improved through honesty. There is more authenticity between us now, less pretense and performance. We are rebuilding on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation. The process isn't perfect or complete. There are still awkward moments and old patterns that threaten to reassert themselves. Maintaining healthy boundaries requires ongoing vigilance and courage. Some relationships, like mine with Melissa, may remain cordial rather than close, and I've made peace with that limitation. What surprised me most was the freedom that came from walking away that night. In refusing to accept dismissive treatment, I reclaimed not just my dignity, but my identity beyond my role as William's mother. I rediscovered passions, friendships, and aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by my desperate attempts to remain connected to my son at any cost. The peace I've found isn't dependent on external validation anymore. It comes from honoring my own worth, from refusing to participate in relationships that diminish rather than uplift me. Sometimes, the quietest exit makes the loudest statement about your worth. Have you ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your value? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video if my story resonated with you. I'd be so grateful if you'd share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries even with family. Remember, you teach people how to treat you with every interaction you allow. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to honor yourself in all your relationships.